All right, this week what we want to do is we want to get into looking at this passage out of Amos. Again, what we're trying to do is determine a biblical way of interpreting the Old Testament. And we said that one of the best ways for us to come to that understanding is to look at how the New Testament writers interpreted the Old Testament. That's one of the best ways to learn a proper method of biblical interpretation, is to study the way the writers studied the Old Testament. Now, does anyone remember why we said this is a very good way to understand the Old Testament? The main reason. Okay? But there's something else here that I want you to remember. If we study how the New Testament writers interpret the Old Testament, we're assured that we are properly understanding the Old Testament. That gives us a check of how to properly interpret, because we know the New Testament writers were inspired of God when they interpreted these passages. So we know their method and their way of interpreting the Old Testament must be correct. It's not like reading a commentator. You know, we all have our favorite commentators we like to read, men that we highly respect. But they're fallible. They can be wrong in how they interpret a passage. The New Testament writers can't. They have to be correct. So if we can learn from them how they view the Old Testament, we know that we have a very reliable check there to make sure that we're not getting out of bounds. So this is a wonderful opportunity for us to learn a proper way of studying the Old Testament. Now, I said last week, I'm going to run through this rather quickly and get us back up to the point to where we left off, that I chose this passage for basically three different reasons. The first was that the men had already looked at this passage. And because the men have already looked at this passage, there's some familiarity already. Secondly, it has a direct bearing on our study of pneumatology that we're going to eventually get back to, and also on our study of the temple in the New Testament. And so it's going to actually help us in our study when we come back to this passage later on. In our other studies, we'll have already covered the groundwork real well, so we'll be very familiar with it. And finally, it's a clear example of several of the issues that we've raised in this present study on the method of interpreting the Old Testament. By the way, that word pericope, I actually copied this over for some other notes. A pericope is simply a small segment of Scripture. It's a theological term for a small section of Scripture. It's also used, by the way, in Roman Catholic circles, referring to some of the teachings of the church, but don't let it hang you up. It's also used as a standard theological term for discussing a segment or a passage of Scripture. So if you hear or see something referred to as a pericope, you know it's just a passage of Scripture is all it is, okay? If you didn't hear that, don't worry about it. Yeah. Okay, but you can impress somebody now, by the way. You can go start talking about a pericope and all that good stuff, okay? Anyway, moving right along. I want us to begin looking at the passage itself. How many of y'all actually have the outline that I passed out last week? Okay, a lot of y'all got it. I'm sorry, guys. I thought there were some more copies up here, but I cannot find them. So if you don't have one, we'll get you updated next week. I apologize for that. I want us to look first at the background of Amos the prophet. Now, we talked about this in closing last week, but I want us to spend a little more time on it. First, he prophesied in the time from the mid-700s, probably around about 760 BC is when Amos was prophesying. Not only that, but he was from Judah, and he was called by God to prophesy not to Judah, but to the northern kingdom. And you've got to understand there's a separation of the kingdoms at this point. You've got the kings of the southern kingdom and the kings of the northern kingdom. After Solomon, the breakup of the kingdoms, from that time forward, you had the northern kingdom and then the southern kingdom. The southern kingdom was comprised mostly of the tribe of Judah. The northern kingdom were the other tribes of Israel. And the northern kingdom is actually going to fall into captivity sooner than the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom tended to be much more wicked. Thank you. Does anybody need a copy? Randy, you want to you want to pass those out? Who else needs one? There we go. Just enough. Just enough. And so the northern kingdom, because of their idolatry, and by the way, this ties in also, just to give you a little added background, this is going to tie in and have profound implications later on in the New Testament when you have the attitude of the children of Israel toward the Samaritans. This is part of the issue here. The northern kingdom is going to be taken off and basically carried off into captivity, and for all practical purposes, the tribes of the northern kingdom become so intermixed with the people of the world that the Judah, the tribe of Judah, and the children of Israel that come back from captivity basically consider them not to be true Israel anymore. They're rejected. That's the reason the Jews hated the Samaritans so much, is because of that intermingling and intermixing of the pagan nations and the fact that they settled in that area of the northern kingdom. So it has implications that carry out for the rest of the history of the New Testament as well. So then Amos has been called by God to go into the northern kingdom and prophesy to the northern kingdom of their coming destruction. And this is not an easy calling that this man has. He's already going to be hated because of where he comes from. And then secondly, he is bringing them a message of utter destruction. Now, to be fair, while he's prophesying in the northern kingdom, he's also going to prophesy about the destruction of the southern kingdom as well. It's not that he's playing favorites, but the message that he's bringing is a very, very strong message of destruction from God. Not only that, he's not very well known. He was not a professional prophet. If you remember, when you look back there at the very beginning of Amos, it tells us that he was a figure, not a figure, but a figure. Okay? He tended sycamore fig trees. He was basically a gardener. And that's what he did. He tended sycamore fig trees. They would prune them. They would have to prune them and care for them. And it was a traveling job. They would have to travel all over the kingdom, basically like a modern-day fruit picker. And it was not considered to be like, we have tree surgeons and horticulturists. It didn't really rank right up there, although it was a very highly skilled job. Same way with caring for the olive trees. Yeah, he was like a migrant worker, but he also had the experience and understanding of like a tree surgeon. So it was a very important position, an important job as far as agriculturally, but they were looked down upon. And on top of that, he was a shepherd. We get the wrong idea of shepherds. We think that they held shepherds up in very high esteem at that time. They didn't. Shepherding was a necessary job, But because